Hey BookTube, here are my thoughts about Attachments by Rainbow Rowell.
I got my ticket for the long way round.
Attachments is my fourth and a half book of Rainbow Rowell's. I think I've read everything she's written. This is her debut novel, and I think that's pretty amazing because it's just so good. This is a story about Lincoln and Jennifer and Beth, and the book opens with an email between Jennifer and Beth. And our main character is Lincoln. Now, Lincoln is a guy that I'm really glad I got to know from the inside out rather than the outside looking in. Because I think I would have had a very different view of him, and I would have had a lot of preconceived notions that would play into my perception of him. Lincoln is a guy who is stuck. And he's stuck because he pinned everything, his hopes, his dreams, his whole future on a girl. And this was his high school sweetheart. He followed her to college. She outgrew that relationship pretty early on in college, and he just didn't know what to do with himself. So he went on and got a degree, and then he didn't know what to do, so he got another degree, and then he got this job at this newspaper as their IT guy. This is set in the early 90s when companies were really afraid of the internet. And so they had these security programs that would flag emails for inappropriate content. So this correspondence between Jennifer and Beth comes up as having inappropriate content. And so while Lincoln knows that it doesn't have inappropriate content, he decides not to flag it so that each successive email that comes in goes into and gets flagged by the security program. So he has to keep reading. Well, that's basically the book. I think it's really important to say here that Lincoln made a big mistake that a lot of people make, and that is to hang all of your hopes and your dreams and everything, your whole life, on a person. Because persons change. People change and they grow and they turn out to be completely different than what you thought they were. And it's not that they really are, it's just that they grew and became something else. And when that happens and you've pinned everything on them, they'll disappoint you, and they may leave you in a place that it's hard to recover from. And that's where Lincoln is. Lincoln's just stuck. He's afraid to kind of form relationships because he's afraid he'll get hurt again, and he really doesn't know what to do with himself. So he works at this newspaper, and he's a good guy. But the thing is, we'd have a very different view of him if we were observing him through the eyes of another character, rather than seeing the world through his eyes, through his internal monologue. But I have to say that the real story, it's him emerging from this dark place that he's kind of cocooned himself into, afraid of the world, afraid of life, afraid to make any plans or do anything that might be a risk because he might get hurt. He starts to take risks, and he starts to take little baby steps, which turn into bigger steps, which turn into bigger steps. And he just comes out of his shell, and that's the strength of the story. Now, I also want to talk about her writing. Rainbow Rowell's writing always surprises me. And I think that that's a very unique quality for an author, because it's not out of context with the characters, the way she's written them, or how you would expect them to behave, or like dialogue. It doesn't, like, people don't say unexpected things, but they address issues in a way that always surprises me a little bit. I think that's because most stories follow a fairy tale format. And that is just, you have your people, they run into a conflict, and then they overcome a conflict, and then they live happily ever after. Or they don't, but the books I read, I try and stick with the ones that do. And in this case, you kind of get there, but you get there by a very circuitous route. She won't just give you the standard thing. She will kind of go off and explore things or comment on things in a way that I never expect. About the time that I think that things are going to go beautifully, and, they're going to, he's going to see her and she's going to turn around and it's going to be beautiful. He sees her and she goes right on walking. And later she calls him or something unexpected happens. But it doesn't happen the way I feel like it's going to happen. And I love that because it's so unpredictable. They're very real-life people in real-life situations making real-life comments about real life. I love that because she doesn't just stop there. She kind of tells you the whole story and brings it to a beautiful conclusion. That's what I loved about Attachments. she was really able to tell this wonderful story about this loser guy who turns out not to be a loser at all. And we would have thought he was a loser had we observed him through the eyes of another character. So those are my thoughts on attachments and Rainbow Rowell. If you've read this, I would certainly love to know your thoughts. So let's talk about that in comments. And that's it for now for me. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
You're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my walk. You're gonna miss me by my talk. Oh, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone.